I'm not crying. Perfect, Julian said softly. Because I'm not watching. The last candle on the table had burned down to a thin, wavering flame. Beyond the glass walls of the Arden House rooftop lounge, Manhattan blurred beneath rain and low clouds. Every streetlight stretched into gold on the wet avenues below. The city looked far away enough to touch. Evelyn Mercer stood barefoot at the window, one hand pressed against the cool glass, the other wrapped around her phone. The email was still open. Martin Hale had signed it the way he signed everything that was meant to sound civilized. In light of recent circumstances, the board will convene an emergency vote in 48 hours regarding the acquisition proposal and the recommended appointment of a co-managing executive. Recommended appointment. A polite phrase for putting someone else in the chair she had fought to earn. Her black suit jacket lay abandoned over the back of a cream-colored lounge chair. Her hair, usually pinned with ruthless precision, had come loose at one temple. She looked like a woman who had survived the room downstairs, the dinner before that, the investors, the board members, the flood of questions, the rain, the cameras outside the hotel, and had only now realized there was nowhere left to put the weight of it. Julian had seen powerful people unravel before. Usually they did it loudly. They broke glasses. They blamed assistants. They made calls they regretted by morning. They demanded a different room, a better bottle, a person to punish for the fact that the night had not obeyed them. Evelyn Mercer did none of those things. She simply stood there, perfectly straight, while her fingers trembled around her phone. Julian crossed the room without making the polished wood floor creak beneath him. He switched off the harsh overhead lights, leaving only the amber glow of a standing lamp near the bar. Then he removed the untouched glass of water from beside her laptop and replaced it with tea. She glanced at it without turning around. I don't drink tea. No, he said. You drink coffee that tastes like legal warfare and pretend it counts as dinner. For 1 second, her mouth almost moved. Then it didn't. Julian set the cup down carefully. You remembered. I manage a hotel, he said. Remembering things is how I avoid being yelled at by people who own scarves more expensive than my first car. That did it. A breath left her, not quite a laugh, not quite anything. But when she looked down at the email again, the breath caught in her throat. Julian did not ask what Martin had written. He had already seen enough of Martin Hale that evening to know the man's cruelty would never arrive wearing a cruel expression. Martin preferred concern. He preferred long pauses before saying a woman was tired. He preferred phrases like stability, continuity, transition. He preferred making a knife look like a hand offered to help. Evelyn's shoulders rose once. Then again. She put the phone face down on the narrow table beside the window. I'm fine, she said. Julian looked at the rain sliding down the glass. Of course you are. She turned sharply. You don't believe me. No. His voice stayed easy. I believe you're trying very hard to be. Her expression tightened. It was the look of a woman waiting for the next mistake. The question he should not ask. The sympathy she did not want. The empty assurance she had probably heard from 100 men who wanted to feel wise beside her. You'll be okay. It will work out. You're stronger than this. Julian had learned long ago that people in pain were often handed compliments that sounded suspiciously like instructions. Be strong. Be graceful. Be grateful. Be less inconvenient. He didn't move closer. He didn't tell her what to do. He only opened his arms. Not wide. Not dramatic. Just enough. Evelyn stared at him. The rain drummed softly against the glass. Somewhere below them, an ambulance sighed through traffic. A muted elevator bell chimed in the private hallway behind the lounge. The city kept moving with the indifference of a place that had seen every kind of heartbreak and never once stopped for one. You don't even know what happened, she said. I know you don't have to explain it before you're allowed to be upset. Her face changed then. Not much. That was the thing about Evelyn. Nothing about her ever changed much. Her reactions lived in the smallest places, a thumb pressed too hard against a napkin, the brief stillness before she answered an insult, the way her chin lifted when she was already wounded. Now her eyes closed. When she opened them again, she crossed the distance between them. She stopped a half step away, as if even then she needed to be sure he would not take more than she was offering. Julian waited. Then Evelyn put her forehead against his chest. The first breath she took broke somewhere in the middle. His hands settled between her shoulder blades, warm and steady through the thin silk of her blouse. He did not pull her closer. He did not say anything clever. He only held her while the woman everyone in the city seemed to describe as unbreakable finally let herself come apart in the quietest room of the hotel. It had started 3 hours earlier with rain. Not the theatrical kind that arrived in movies, just in time to make people fall in love under street lamps. This was New York rain, mean sideways and patient. It came down hard enough to turn every black car at the curb into a slick reflection of itself and made the marble entrance of the Arden House look like the deck of a ship. Julian had been standing near the concierge desk, checking the revised schedule for a wedding party that had lost half its flowers in a delivery accident, when he noticed the woman in the rain. At first, he noticed the umbrella. It was too small for two people, and she was holding it over the younger woman beside her. The younger woman wore a navy dress and had an earpiece tangled in her wet hair. 3 phones were clutched against her chest. She was talking too fast into one of them, apologizing to someone named Mr. Levin while simultaneously trying to wave off a driver who had apparently been sent to the wrong restaurant. The woman holding the umbrella was getting soaked. She wore a black suit that had probably been dry and immaculate 20 minutes before. Her heels were expensive enough to have no business standing in standing water. Dark hair was pulled back at the nape of her neck. Her expression was calm in the way a building looks calm right before the power goes out. "Tell them 11, she said to the younger woman. The younger woman blinked at her. "Evelyn, the restaurant is closed. The whole east side of the dining room is flooding." "Then tell them dinner begins at 11. They're board members. They're grown adults with functioning watches. They can wait 30 minutes. Martin Hale is already asking where you are." Evelyn's expression sharpened. "Then tell Martin Hale he can enjoy the lobby." Julian watched her tilt the umbrella farther toward the younger woman, leaving rain to darken one shoulder of her own jacket. That was when he understood 2 things. First, she was used to being obeyed. Second, she was not cruel. Those 2 facts rarely arrive together. The glass doors opened as the bellman rushed out to help them. Cold rain blew into the lobby. Evelyn stepped inside with the force of a woman refusing to allow weather to become part of her problem. The younger woman followed, soaked and apologetic. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at Evelyn. "I'm sorry. The private rooms at the Sutton are booked. The gallery at the Mercer is under construction. The only place I found that can fit everyone is the Arden House," Julian said. Both women looked at him. The younger one looked relieved. Evelyn looked irritated that anyone else had spoken before she had a chance to decide whether she needed them. Julian liked her immediately. He picked up a clean towel from the concierge station and handed it to the assistant. "You're Nora?" he asked. She looked startled. "Yes." "Good. Nora, take 10 seconds and breathe. The hotel will survive without your full attention for 10 seconds. Then he looked at Evelyn. Up close, she was more striking than he had first realized. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Her beauty had the dangerous quality of something that might cut you if you assumed it existed for your comfort. No, what caught him was the exhaustion around her eyes. Not weakness, not softness, just exhaustion. The kind earned by carrying too much for too long. "You need a room," he said, "or you need an entire evening where nobody is brave enough to interrupt you." Her eyes narrowed. "I need space for 22 people, a late dinner, secure access, working Wi-Fi, a presentation setup, and staff who understand the difference between an investor and a man who thinks saying, 'Do you know who I am?' counts as a personality." Julian smiled. "Oh, the entire evening, then. I don't have time for charm. That makes 2 of us. Fortunately, this is mostly logistics." He motioned toward the elevators. "Who are you?" "Julian Vale, night events director. Can you accommodate us?" "I can." She glanced past him toward the lobby, where the rain had driven a cluster of people under the awning. Several men in dark coats were stepping out of black SUVs. One of them, silver-haired and dry beneath an umbrella held by someone else, looked through the glass doors with the bland confidence of a man who had never had to raise his voice to control a room. Martin Hale. Julian could tell because Evelyn's posture changed by 1/fraction of an inch. "I don't need special treatment," she said. "Good," Julian replied. "Special treatment is usually expensive and disappointing. I need a solution." He held her gaze. "Then I'll give you one." The top-floor lounge was technically closed. A minor leak in the service corridor had shut down the private space for repairs that afternoon. The furniture had been covered. The lighting team had been rescheduled. The restaurant manager would almost certainly question whether reopening it for an unscheduled board dinner was wise. Julian knew all that before he reached the elevator. He also knew the lounge had a kitchen, a dedicated service lift, floor-to-ceiling windows, and enough privacy to keep half the financial district from wandering in. More importantly, it had one thing Evelyn Mercer did not have at that moment: time. When the elevator doors opened, he told a manager on duty to call the executive chef. Tell her we need 22 covers in 40 minutes. The manager stared at him. Julian, 22 covers. The lounge is closed. It's open now. The maintenance team can work around us. He turned toward the private event staff gathering behind him. Low light. No florals. Long table. No place cards until Nora sends us a seating chart. Bring the charcoal linen, not the ivory. And someone find out whether Mr. Hale drinks bourbon because he likes it or because he wants everyone else to think he does. The staff scattered. Evelyn stood just inside the lounge doorway, still holding the wet umbrella. "You're making this look easy," she said. Julian took the umbrella from her and set it in a brass stand. "That's because it isn't my company on the line." Her expression flickered. "What makes you think it is?" "The way your assistant looks at you," he said. "The way the rain is the least of your problems. The fact that Mr. Hale arrived early." For the first time, she seemed less irritated than curious. Julian stepped aside and gestured toward the half-dark lounge. "Welcome to Arden House." She looked around at the covered furniture, the open windows full of rain-black city, the staff moving quickly under Julian's quiet instructions. "This place is under repair. Most interesting things are." Her mouth almost smiled. Then she caught herself. "Don't make my dinner into your performance." Julian picked up a folded napkin from a service cart and inspected it as if the fate of the country depended on its corners. "Don't worry," he said. "I only make sure other people don't turn it into theirs." By 11 o'clock, the lounge no longer looked like an emergency. It looked intentional. The long walnut table had been dressed in charcoal linen and low glass votives. The windows reflected the warm room back at itself, making the city outside seem like a second, colder dinner party happening on the other side of the glass. The rain softened the skyline until the buildings appeared suspended in mist. A violin playlist murmured through the speakers, low enough to be ignored but elegant enough to make everyone unconsciously sit straighter. Evelyn stood at the head of the table as the last guest arrived. She had dried her hair, changed nothing else, and somehow looked more composed than before. Her suit was still damp at one shoulder. A faint line of rain had darkened the fabric near her collarbone. But she had rearranged herself into authority. Julian watched from the side of the room while he checked on the first course. He had spent enough years in hotels to understand that a table was never just a table. People reveal themselves through where they sat, what they ordered, who they ignored, who they performed for. Martin Hale took the seat 3 places to Evelyn's right, close enough to be important, far enough to suggest he had chosen not to challenge her directly. He was in his late 60s, handsome in the expensive, preserved way certain men became when everyone around them had spent years making sure they never heard the word no. His silver hair was neatly combed. His tie was a muted navy. His smile arrived a second before his eyes did. Beside him sat 2 independent directors, a representative from the acquisition group, several investors, and a man Julian had not seen before. 45, maybe. Tailored suit. A face built for being described as reassuring. The man kept glancing at Evelyn as though he had already been assigned a place in her life. Julian did not like him. Nora stepped quietly to his side. "That's Peter Hollis," she said under her breath. "Martin's preferred co-manager." "Co-manager?" Julian repeated. Nora's jaw tightened. "That's what they're calling it." "And what would you call it?" She looked toward Evelyn. "A coup with a very expensive watch." Julian hid a smile. Across the table, Evelyn began speaking about Mercer and Rowe's latest project, a citywide lighting initiative designed to improve safety in neglected public corridors without turning neighborhoods into sterile commercial zones. She spoke with clarity and control. No wasted words. No decorative confidence. Julian could see why people followed her. She did not sound like someone trying to win a room. She sounded like someone who had already built one. The dinner moved smoothly through the first course. Investors asked questions. Evelyn answered them. The acquisition representative praised the company's growth. Martin nodded at appropriate intervals, his face arranged into patient approval. Then, just after the main plates were set down, he leaned back in his chair. "You know, Evelyn," he said, "your father would have been proud to see this room." A pause settled over the table. Evelyn's expression did not change. "Thank you." Martin smiled gently. He always believed in your vision. He also believed in making sure vision had the right support around it. Julian saw Evelyn's thumb press against the edge of her napkin. Tiny movement. Almost nothing. But Nora saw it too. Her gaze dropped. Martin continued, "Mercer & Rowe has become more than a family company. It has responsibilities now. Employees, investors, cities depending on us. The question isn't whether Evelyn is talented. Of course she is." He looked toward Peter Hollis. "The question is whether one person should carry so much alone." Evelyn lifted her wineglass but did not drink. "Interesting," she said. "I was under the impression we were discussing a delayed dinner, not reorganizing the company between the halibut and the dessert." A few people smiled politely. Martin's did not fade. "Of course. I only mean that stability matters." "Stability," Evelyn repeated. "It does." She looked directly at him. "Some people use the word stability when they mean obedience." The room grew still. Julian watched Martin's face. The man was too practiced to react openly, but his hand paused against the stem of his glass. Then he laughed softly. "Evelyn, no one is questioning your independence." Julian almost admired the sentence. It was perfectly built to question exactly that. Martin shifted his attention to the room. "I simply think there is value in discussing the acquisition proposal sooner rather than later. The offer on the table is generous. The proposed leadership structure would protect the company's future." Peter Hollis gave a small, calm nod, as if he had not been waiting all evening to be introduced as Evelyn's replacement with better manners. Evelyn's gaze moved around the table. Julian could see it happening. Everyone was waiting to see whether she would snap, whether she would become too sharp, too emotional, too proud, waiting for proof that Martin's careful little story about her was true. Julian walked toward the table with a bottle of mineral water. As he reached Martin's chair, he paused. "Mr. Hale," he said pleasantly, "I'm afraid I need to interrupt." Martin looked up. Julian smiled. "The chef is very particular about the main course. He believes important decisions should never be made before people have finished eating." The table blinked at him. Martin's mouth tightened. "I don't see what the chef has to do with." "Neither does he," Julian said. "He's quite dramatic." A small laugh moved around the table. Not enough to humiliate Martin. Enough to break his rhythm. Julian placed a fresh glass of water beside Evelyn without looking directly at her. Then he leaned slightly closer as he poured. "I've worked in hotels long enough to know," he murmured, "the people who talk most about stability are usually the ones least comfortable when they don't control the room." Evelyn looked at him. Her eyes warmed by half a degree. "Do you have strong feelings about corporate governance?" "I have strong feelings about people who turn dinner into an execution." That time she did smile. It was quick, almost private, but it was there. The meal continued. Martin did not press further until dessert. Evelyn did not give him another opening. And by the time the final board members began leaving, the rain had eased into a fine silver mist against the windows. One by one, the guests disappeared into the elevators. The acquisition representative left with Peter Hollis, both of them speaking low enough to make it obvious they wanted to be overheard. The independent directors shook Evelyn's hand and promised they would review the details before any formal vote. Martin was last. Of course he was. He stood across from Evelyn near the window, hands loosely folded in front of him. "You handled tonight beautifully," he said. "I know." His smile deepened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Evelyn's expression cooled. "Harder for whom?" "For you." "Martin," she said, "you have mistaken my patience for uncertainty more times than I can count. I don't recommend making it a habit." Something sharp flashed behind his eyes. Then it vanished. 48 hours, he said quietly. "Think carefully about what is best for the company." He left without waiting for an answer. The elevator doors closed. The lounge seemed to exhale. Nora came back from the hallway with her shoes in one hand and a stack of folders in the other. I hate him, she said. Evelyn removed one earring. No, you don't. I professionally hate him. That is more believable. Nora looked at her boss. Do you want me to cancel tomorrow? No. Call legal? Already did. Call the independent directors? Not tonight. Nora hesitated. Evelyn's gaze had drifted toward the rain-streaked window. Go home, Nora. I can stay. I know. That was the difference. Evelyn never said thank you in the sentimental way people expected from powerful women. She said it by making sure no one had to prove their loyalty through exhaustion. Nora left. The staff cleared the room in careful silence. Julian supervised from a distance. He did not ask Evelyn whether she wanted company. He did not sit beside her and pretend he belonged in a crisis he had not been invited into. He only made sure the lamp stayed low. He only had the musician's playlist changed to something softer. He only told the bartender to leave tea and sparkling water on the sideboard. At 1:27 in the morning, Martin's email arrived. And Evelyn came apart in Julian's arms. She cried without drama. That made it worse. Her body stayed almost rigid even while her face pressed into his shirt. She tried to keep the sound contained, as if grief itself might become evidence against her if it escaped too loudly. Julian's hand moved once slowly between her shoulders. You don't have to hold your breath, he said. I'm not, I know. She stopped trying to explain. After a while, she said into his chest, he thinks I'm tired. Julian rested his cheek lightly against the top of her hair. You are tired. I know. That doesn't make him right. Her fingers tightened in the fabric at his back. He thinks I'm emotional. You are emotional. She pulled away just enough to glare at him through wet eyes. Julian lifted one hand. Still not the same as being wrong. For the first time since the email arrived, she laughed. It was small and broken, but real. Then she looked at him. Really looked. The amber light caught in her eyes. Her mascara had smudged beneath one of them, faintly, imperfectly. Julian had the sudden, dangerous thought that he wanted to remember her exactly like this, not because she was vulnerable, but because she was allowing herself to be. I'm not the kind of woman who does this, she said. Cries? Falls apart in hotel lounges with men she met 4 hours ago. Julian's mouth softened. You don't need to define yourself tonight. She stared at him. Then she stepped back. The moment shifted. Not disappeared. Shifted. Julian understood enough about women like Evelyn Mercer to know that after surrender came recovery. After recovery came embarrassment. She would be gathering herself now, pulling every loose thread back into place. He gave her room to do it. By the time he walked her to the elevator, she had retied her hair, put her jacket back on, and returned her phone to her hand. She looked composed again. Only her eyes betrayed her. Julian handed her the umbrella she had left by the door. Take this. I have a driver. Drivers don't stop rain from getting into your hair between the curb and the car. I don't care about my hair. No, he said. You care about not giving the photographers outside a better story than they deserve. Her gaze lifted sharply. You noticed them. Evelyn, I manage events in Manhattan. If 3 men in identical dark jackets stand across the street pretending to smoke in a storm, they're either reporters or terrible spies. She took the umbrella. The elevator arrived. Before she stepped inside, she turned back. Are you here tomorrow night? Julian leaned one shoulder against the wall. I usually am. She held his gaze for a moment too long. Then he added, though I'd advise against returning solely to confirm that. The elevator doors closed around her. He watched until the polished brass reflected only his own face. The next evening, shortly after 9, Evelyn Mercer returned to the Arden house. She came alone. No assistant. No driver waiting inside. No board members. No rain this time, though the city was still wet from the night before, and the sidewalks glittered under passing headlights. She wore a charcoal dress under a dark coat, less formal than the evening before, but not casual enough to suggest she had not thought carefully about what she was doing. At the front desk, she said, I'm here to use the lounge. The concierge smiled politely. Mr. Vale asked us to let you know it's available. Evelyn looked up. Of course he did. The elevator opened onto the top floor. The lounge was quieter than the night before. No long table. No board members. No candles burning themselves to death in crystal holders. Just one corner of the room arranged beside the windows, a low sofa, a side table, a lamp, a carafe of water, a laptop charger, a notebook, and a cup of Earl Grey tea waiting beneath a small silver cover. Beside the tea sat a pair of dark green velvet slippers. Evelyn stopped. Julian appeared from the hallway, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tie loosened. "You remembered the tea," she said. "You said you didn't drink tea." "I don't." "Then it's purely decorative." Her eyes fell to the slippers. "You keep slippers for stranded executives? Only the ones who look like their shoes are plotting against them." She glanced down at her heels. "They are Italian." "Then they've been plotting in several languages." "Against her will," she smiled. It altered her whole face. Julian had spent the day thinking about that smile. He did not let himself show it. Instead, he walked to the side table and lifted the cover from the tea. "No sugar." "You remembered that, too. You drank half of it last night after telling me you didn't drink tea." It made an impression. Evelyn took off her coat. "I'm not here because of you." "Good," Julian said. "I would hate to think I was distracting you from your impending corporate mutiny." Her expression turned serious. "I'm meeting 2 of the independent directors here tonight." "I know." She looked at him. "You know?" "I know they called the hotel earlier asking whether the lounge could be used for a private presentation. I assumed it had something to do with you, seeing as one of them asked whether Mr. Hale would be present." Evelyn's mouth tightened. "He will be now." Julian's expression changed. "What happened?" She handed him her phone. The message came from Nora. "Martin has invited the acquisition team. And Peter Hollis. He says the board deserves a full conversation." Julian read it once. Then again. He handed the phone back. "He's turning your presentation into an ambush." "Yes." "And you're thinking of canceling." "No." That answer came fast. Too fast. Julian watched her. "Then were you thinking?" Evelyn looked toward the city. For a while, she said nothing. Outside, the windows reflected the room back at them. Her image stood beside Julian's in the black glass, her in dark silk and bare feet now, because she had slipped off her heels and stepped into the green velvet slippers. Him with his loosened tie and rolled sleeves. They looked less like a CEO and a hotel director than 2 people who had accidentally stepped out of their own lives for a moment. Finally, she said, "I want him to leave here remembering something." "What?" "That Mercer and Rowe is not my father's inheritance." Her voice was low, but each word landed cleanly. "It isn't a line on a balance sheet. It isn't an asset for Martin to sell to the highest bidder. It's people. It's neighborhoods. It's every engineer, designer, electrician, architect, and project manager who spent years making something that mattered." Julian nodded once. "Then don't let them spend the evening looking at a price." Her eyes moved to his. "What do you mean?" He walked toward the dark and far end of the lounge, where the hotel's lighting controls were concealed behind a paneled wall. "What are you presenting?" "The new city lighting project." "Not the financial model." "No." "The actual work." "Yes." He looked back at her. "Then let them see it." By 10:30, the lounge was full again. But the atmosphere had changed. The long table was gone. In its place, Julian had arranged the room like a gallery reception. Small tables near the windows, subdued champagne service, and a cleared central space where Mercer and Rowe's lighting samples were set up on narrow panels. The samples looked almost unimpressive before they were switched on. A few sleek fixtures, some textured glass, a series of small architectural models showing street corners, public parks, subway entrances, old brick storefronts. Martin arrived first. He wore the same navy tie as the night before. Julian wondered if he owned several identical ones or simply liked the effect of looking permanently prepared to take someone else's seat. Peter Hollis arrived beside him. He shook Evelyn's hand with a smooth, sympathetic smile. "Evelyn, I know this is an unusual moment." "You're right," she said. "Usually people wait to be asked before attending private meetings." Peter's smile held. "I'm here because I care about the future of the company." "Of course you are." Julian stood at the bar, watching without appearing to watch. Evelyn handled the first half hour with precision. She greeted the independent directors. She introduced the project team. She answered questions about budgets, timelines, and municipal partnerships. Then Martin stepped into the center of the room with a glass of bourbon in his hand. He tapped it lightly with one finger. "Before we begin," he said, "I think we should acknowledge the context." Evelyn's expression did not move. Martin continued, "Mercer and Rowe has reached a point where strategic partnership may be the most responsible path forward. The acquisition proposal gives us stability, access to global resources, and the benefit of shared leadership." Peter Hollis stood beside him, looking reassuring. Julian saw the independent directors exchange glances. This was not a conversation. It was a performance. Martin wanted them to see Evelyn boxed in. He wanted them to imagine Peter already standing beside her in photographs. He wanted the room to become a picture of the future before Evelyn could say no. Evelyn stepped forward. "Before anyone discusses leadership structures," she said, "I'd like to show you the work itself." Martin smiled. "Of course. But perhaps it would be useful to frame the discussion first. You've been framing it for 24 hours. The room tightened. Martin's smile cooled. "Evelyn, there is no need to make this personal." Julian had heard that sentence many times in many rooms. It almost always meant someone had already made it personal and did not enjoy being called on it. Evelyn inhaled. He saw it in her. The anger. The temptation to cut Martin down in front of everyone. The trap waiting beneath it. If she did, Martin would tilt his head and look patient. Peter would look concerned. The directors would feel the discomfort and mistake it for proof. Julian moved. He crossed the room and stopped beside the lighting control panel. "Forgive me," he said easily. "The hotel has added a small surprise to the evening." Martin looked annoyed. "This is a board discussion." Julian smiled at him. "Then I'm sure everyone will appreciate seeing what they're discussing." He pressed a button. The main lights dimmed. Not suddenly. Slowly. The room softened into shadow. The windows became mirrors. The skyline outside deepened into black velvet cut through with silver rain. Then the first lighting sample came alive. A warm wash of amber moved over the model of an old neighborhood block. It filled the tiny sidewalk without bleaching it. A corner bench glowed gently. The doorway of a small cafe brightened. The street looked safer without looking sterile. The second sample lit the model of a subway entrance. Soft white light curved beneath the stairwell, not harsh enough to make faces look pale, but clear enough to make every step visible. The third panel illuminated a park path in layers of low gold, guiding the eye forward without swallowing the darkness around it. The room felt quiet. Not because it was flashy, because it was human. The kind of light that made you think of walking home later than you should have and seeing the street ahead of you clearly enough to breathe. Julian took a microphone from the side table. "Before anyone decides whether they believe in this company," he said, "perhaps they should stand inside what it wants to build." Then he turned toward Evelyn. He held out the microphone. "Now," he said, "the person who made this should introduce it." Evelyn looked at him. For 1 second, she seemed caught off guard. Then she walked into the center of the room. She did not begin with Martin. She did not begin with the acquisition offer. She began with a story. "When I was 14, she said, my father took me to a project site in Queens. It was raining. The streetlights had been out for 3 months, and the city kept promising repairs. She looked at the glowing model beside her. There was a woman waiting for the bus with her daughter. She had a flashlight in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. My father told me, people think lighting is decoration. It isn't. It tells someone whether the world expects them to make it home." The room stayed still. Evelyn spoke about safety, preservation, design, the need for cities to feel alive after dark, not merely watched. She spoke about local workers, local materials, neighborhood histories. She spoke about the difference between illuminating a place and erasing it. She never once sounded defensive. She sounded certain. Martin tried to interrupt near the end. "Evelyn, no one disputes the beauty of the project. But beauty and commercial viability." Julian lifted his glass. "Mr. Hale," he said pleasantly, "we have a rule here." Martin turned toward him. Julian smiled. "When the lights come up, We let people see before we decide who should turn them off. A few guests laughed. This time, even one of the independent directors did not hide it. Martin's mouth flattened. Evelyn did not look at Julian again until the presentation was over. The directors stayed late, much later than scheduled. They asked questions Evelyn had clearly prepared for. They asked harder questions she had not. She answered all of them. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, honestly. When the last guest finally left, the city had gone nearly quiet beneath the hotel windows. Nora hugged Evelyn before remembering where she was and turning it into a brisk squeeze of the arm. "You were incredible," she said. "I was prepared." "You were both." Nora looked toward Julian, then back at Evelyn, one eyebrow lifting. Evelyn ignored her. Nora smiled anyway and disappeared into the elevator. Julian found Evelyn at the far end of the lounge, standing beside the windows. Her heels were back on. Her coat was draped over one arm. The green slippers sat neatly beneath a chair. "You nearly ruined my entire business strategy," she said without turning around. Julian came to stand beside her. "That's a strange way to thank someone." "I don't thank people." "I noticed." She looked at him then. The lighting samples still glowed behind them, throwing warm reflections across the dark glass. "You knew I hated it." "What?" "People speaking for me." Julian's expression softened. "So I didn't. You took over the room. I took away the part where they were waiting for you to lose it." Her eyes stayed on his. "I could have handled Martin." "I know. You don't know that." "Yes," Julian said quietly. "I do." Something in her face loosened. She stepped closer. The air between them changed. Julian felt it before she touched him. Her hand lifted to his tie, which had shifted slightly during the evening. She straightened the knot with two careful fingers. Her knuckles brushed the base of his throat. Neither of them moved. "Is this a reward?" Julian asked softly, "or a warning?" Evelyn's eyes flicked up to his. "Neither." "That's disappointing." Her hand remained at his tie for one more second. Then she let go. Julian caught the edge of her fingers before she could pull them fully away. Not tightly, just enough to ask. Evelyn looked down at their hands, then back at him. For a moment, Julian thought she might kiss him. Instead, she stepped back. "Good night, Julian." He released her. "Good night, Evelyn." She left before either of them could make the moment into something more dangerous. By morning, the pictures were everywhere. Evelyn saw the first one on a financial news site while standing in the glass conference room outside her office. It showed her leaving the Arden house after the first board dinner. Julian was beside her, holding the umbrella over both of them. His hand hovered near the small of her back as he guided her toward the waiting car. Her face was turned toward him, not the camera. It was not intimate. Not really. But it was enough. The headline did the rest. Mercer and Rowe CEO spotted with hotel executive during control fight. Nora stood across from her, pale with anger. This had to be Martin. Probably. He had someone following you. Probably. Do you want legal to send a notice? No. Do you want me to call the board? No. Evelyn, not yet. She stared at the photo. The problem was not that it looked romantic. The problem was that it looked human. She hated that Martin had found the one thing she had never allowed people to use against her, the possibility that she had needed someone. By late afternoon, a board email arrived. Martin's wording was careful. Concerns regarding governance optics. Questions about judgment during a sensitive period. A suggestion that Evelyn voluntarily clarify the nature of her relationship with Julian Vale before the vote. Nora read it over Evelyn's shoulder. "Oh, I hate him," she said. "Professionally? No. Personally? Spiritually? In every possible category." Evelyn almost smiled. Then she picked up her coat. "Where are you going?" "To the Arden house." Nora stared. "That seems bold." "It isn't what you think." "Evelyn, that sentence has never once preceded a good decision." The hotel bar was quiet when she arrived. It was too early for the late crowd and too late for business meetings. A pianist played something slow near the back of the room. The lamps were low. Rain had started again, tapping softly against the tall windows. Julian sat at the end of the bar, reading through event notes with a glass of sparkling water beside him. He looked up as she entered. His face changed almost immediately. Not panic, not annoyance, recognition. He closed the folder. Evelyn stopped 3 feet away. We shouldn't see each other until after the board vote, she said. Julian leaned back slightly. Hello to you too. I'm serious. So am I. Hello, Evelyn. Her jaw tightened. He waited. That was somehow worse than if he had argued. Martin leaked photographs, she said. He's suggesting I'm compromised. Julian's expression became still. I saw. They'll use it. Yes. I can't give them another reason. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay. The ease of it threw her. That's all you have to say. What would you prefer? I don't know. Would you prefer I tell you the board is wrong? No. They are? Julian. Would you prefer I tell you the pictures are nobody's business? They aren't. Agreed. She folded her arms. This is not funny. No, he said. It isn't. The pianist shifted into another song. The room filled with a soft, mournful melody that made the silence between them feel more exposed. Evelyn looked at the bar. I need distance. Julian nodded again. I understand. She searched his face. You do? I understand that you have a board vote in less than 2 days and a man trying to turn every human thing about you into a liability. Her throat tightened. I don't want you dragged into this. That's considerate. It's practical. Of course it is. She looked at him sharply. Julian stood. He was close enough now that she could see the faint shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He had probably been working since late afternoon. He smelled like cedar, rain, and the clean starch of his shirt. I can stay out of the papers, he said. Out of your office. Out of any room where being seen with me makes your life harder. She said nothing. But don't make me the thing you sacrifice so other people can believe you're strong. The words landed quietly. Harder because they were quiet. Julian held her gaze. I have never asked you to give up anything, Evelyn. Her chest rose. Phil. She looked away first. That's not fair. No, he said gently. It isn't. For 1 second, she almost reached for him. Then she stopped herself. Good night, Julian. He did not follow her. He only said, Good night, Evelyn. She walked out into the rain alone. Mercer and Rowe's offices were nearly empty by 11 that night. The cleaning crew moved silently through the lower floors. Somewhere down the hall, a vacuum hummed behind a closed door. The city outside the windows glowed in fragments, reflected against the glass partitions until Evelyn's office seemed filled with dozens of ghost versions of herself. She had taken off her jacket. Her heels were under the desk. Folders covered every surface. Acquisition agreements, employment projections, internal reports, legal memos, Martin's old investment disclosures, Peter Hollis's consulting history, notes from the independent directors. Evelyn had spent years believing that if she prepared enough, nobody could surprise her. Martin had surprised her anyway. Not because she had missed the numbers. Because she had underestimated how willing he was to make her personal life part of the business plan. She sat at her desk and read through the acquisition offer one final time. Then she found it. Not hidden exactly. Buried. A side agreement between the acquiring group and investment fund Martin had quietly advised for years. If the sale went through, the fund would receive a significant payout through a real estate portfolio tied to Mercer and Rowe's future redevelopment contracts. It was not illegal. Not automatically. But it was a conflict he had never disclosed to the full board. Evelyn stared at the document. Then she laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because suddenly the whole thing was so obvious. Martin had never wanted stability. He wanted profit with a respectful vocabulary. At 11:47, Nora came into the office carrying 2 coffees. You're still here. So are you. I brought bribes. Evelyn took one. Thank you. Nora set the other folders down. Do we have him? We have enough to ask questions he can't answer. Nora's face lit with something close to joy. I have never loved you more. That is a very inappropriate thing to say to your employer. You're not my employer right now. You're a woman with color-coded evidence. They worked for another hour. At midnight, Nora finally left after Evelyn promised she would not sleep at the office. Evelyn did not promise she would sleep. When the floor was silent again, she picked up her phone. Julian's name waited near the top of her messages. She stared at it for a long time. Then she called. He answered on the second ring. Evelyn. His voice was low, not sleepy, as if he had been awake. Huh? A pause. Huh? She closed her office door and leaned against it. I found something. Good. It's not enough to destroy him. You don't need to destroy him. I know. It only needs to be enough to tell the truth. Her eyes closed. The fact that he understood exactly what she meant almost undid her. I used to think, she said slowly, that if I didn't need anyone, no one could use me. Julian was quiet for a moment. The city flashed against the window behind her. Headlights. A red signal. White rain. Then he said, being loved isn't evidence that you're weak. She swallowed. It feels dangerous. Most good things do at first. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. That sounds rehearsed. It isn't. I'm just annoyingly sincere after midnight. She smiled despite herself. Then her voice softened. Tomorrow, after this is over, I want to see you. On the other end of the line, Julian did not rush to answer. When he did, his voice was warm. Then win tomorrow for yourself. I intend to. And afterward, he said, we'll figure out what you want. Evelyn looked at the documents spread across her desk. For the first time all night, they did not feel like a wall. They felt like a door. The board meeting began at 10 the next morning. By 10:30, Martin Hale had stopped looking patient. By 11, Peter Hollis had stopped looking reassuring. Evelyn sat at the head of the conference table in the Mercer and Row boardroom, sunlight pouring through the high windows in clean white lines. She wore a cream blouse beneath a dark suit. Her hair was pulled back. Her expression was calm. Nora sat along the wall with legal counsel. Across from Evelyn, Martin held the acquisition folder closed in front of him. Before we move forward, he said, I'd like to address the recent concerns around governance and public perception. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. Of course you would. Martin's eyes hardened. Evelyn, this is not personal. No, she said. You've made it professional. The independent directors watched quietly. Evelyn turned toward the screen behind her. A document appeared. Then another. Then a series of financial disclosures. I agree that governance matters, she said. So before anyone votes on an acquisition proposal, I think the board deserves full disclosure of every financial interest connected to that proposal. Martin's face changed. Barely. Enough. Evelyn continued. She laid out the investment fund, the advisory relationship, the future redevelopment contracts, the payout structure, the dates, the signatures. Martin interrupted twice. She let him. Then she answered each objection with a document. Not anger. Not spectacle. Facts. When he finally accused her of using the meeting to distract from recent personal judgment, Evelyn looked directly at him. My personal life is not on this agenda. No one is suggesting you are. The room went still. Evelyn's voice remained steady. I am willing to be questioned about my decisions as chief executive officer. I welcome it. I am not willing to let anyone confuse concern for the company with an attempt to control the woman running it. She looked around the table. I do not oppose advice. I oppose hidden motives. I do not oppose support. I oppose being told that the only version of stability is one where I become easier to manage. The independent director to Martin's left closed her folder. I think we need to suspend discussion of the acquisition until the conflict disclosures are fully reviewed. Another director nodded. Then another. Martin's expression did not collapse. Men like Martin never collapsed in public. They only became smaller in ways everyone could see. The vote on the acquisition was postponed, then rejected before noon. The co-management proposal died with it. By 1 o'clock, Martin Hale was no longer speaking. By 3, Evelyn had released a statement to employees that Mercer and Rowe would remain independent. By 6, the launch event for the city lighting project was back on schedule at the Arden House. Nora had tried to persuade her to cancel. You have won, she said. You're allowed to go home. I know. Then why are we doing this? Evelyn stood before the mirror in her office, fastening a silver earring, because the company still has something to say. Nora watched her reflection, and because Julian will be there. Evelyn glanced at her. Nora lifted both hands. Just checking. The Arden house was glowing by the time Evelyn arrived. The entrance had been transformed for the launch event. Warm architectural light spilled across the stone facade. The hotel's glass doors reflected the city in gold. Inside, the lobby had been arranged with Mercer and Rose display models, photographs of neighborhoods, and a wall of handwritten notes from community partners. The event was crowded. Reporters, city officials, investors, employees, designers, engineers. The atmosphere felt lighter than it had the night before, but only barely. Evelyn knew Martin would not appear. Not after the board meeting. But she also knew the story had already escaped him. Reporters wanted a clean narrative. A woman CEO in a control fight. A mysterious hotel executive. A question of whether romance had compromised her leadership. They wanted something simpler than the truth. Julian stood near the back of the room, speaking to the hotel staff. He wore a black suit tonight, his tie straight, his sleeves crisp. He looked less like the man who had held her while she cried and more like someone built for elegant rooms and impossible evenings. But when he saw her, something softened in his face. He did not come rushing toward her. He did not make her arrival a scene. He simply met her eyes from across the lobby and smiled. Evelyn felt the last hard piece of herself loosen. The formal presentation went well. Her team spoke first. An architect talked about community preservation. An engineer discussed safety standards. A project manager described local employment. Then Evelyn took the stage. She did not mention Martin. She did not mention the board vote. She spoke about the future, about light, about the small ways a city tells people whether they belong in it. When she finished, the applause rose slowly, then filled the room. For one perfect second, everything felt quiet inside her. Then the reporters moved in. At first, Nora handled them. Questions about the board. Questions about the acquisition. Questions about the project timeline. Then a reporter near the front raised his voice. Ms. Mercer, can you clarify whether Julian Vale served as an informal advisor during the board conflict? Nora stepped forward. Tonight's event is about the city lighting initiative. The reporter pushed again. Was Mr. Vale involved in your decision-making? Did your personal relationship with him influence the board vote? The room tightened. Evelyn saw it happen. The subtle shift in people's expressions. The hunger for discomfort. The old instinct in her body to armor herself, to answer with something cold enough that no one could touch her again. Julian stood near the side of the crowd. He did not move immediately. He watched her. Let her decide. But the reporter turned toward Nora, trying to force another answer. That was when Julian stepped forward. Not onto the stage. Not in front of Evelyn. Only to the edge of the press area. His voice was calm. Your question sounds more interested in gossip than in the work being launched tonight. The reporter looked at him. Julian's expression remained pleasant. This room is full of people who spent years building something for the city. Perhaps we could let them have the evening. A few heads turned. The reporter frowned. I'm asking about corporate judgment. Julian nodded. Then ask about corporate judgment. Ask about the project. Ask about the board disclosures. Ask about the people who made this possible. He glanced toward the lighting displays. But don't mistake a woman being seen with someone for a story about her competence. The room fell quiet. Julian took the microphone from the nearest stand. Then he held it out to Evelyn, not claiming the moment, returning it. Evelyn looked at him, at the hand holding the microphone, at the man who knew exactly when to step in and exactly when to step back. She took it. The reporter waited. So did the room. Evelyn looked directly at him. Julian Vale is not my crisis advisor, she said. Her voice carried through the hotel lobby. He is not my strategy consultant. He did not make decisions for me. He did not tell me what to say in the boardroom. She paused. The entire room seemed to lean closer. He was the person who, on the worst night I've had in years, did not ask me to prove I deserved to be there. Julian's face changed, just slightly, but she saw it. Evelyn continued. He reminded me that being understood is not the same as being controlled, and that having someone stand beside you does not make you less capable of standing on your own. No one spoke. Not the reporter. Not the investors. Not even Nora. Evelyn looked toward Julian. Then she lowered the microphone. The applause began somewhere near the back. A single clap, then another. Then the whole room filled with it. Julian did not look triumphant. He looked at her as if she had just told him something private in a crowded room, as if it mattered more because she had chosen to say it herself. When Evelyn stepped down from the small platform, she crossed the space between them. Cameras flashed. She heard them. She did not care. Her hand reached for Julian's wrist. Not his hand. His wrist. A small, deliberate gesture. A way of saying stay. Julian looked down at her fingers around him, then back at her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Evelyn smiled. For the first time in days, she smiled without holding anything back. "I think I am." The rain stopped sometime after midnight. By the time the last guest left, the streets below Arden House were shining black and silver beneath the city lights. Steam lifted from the pavement. Cars moved slowly through the avenues, their headlights stretching across the wet asphalt like ribbons. Julian led Evelyn through a private door onto the rooftop terrace. The lounge behind them had been cleared. The music was gone. The glasses were gone. The staff had removed the launch displays and rolled away the event tables. Only one small table remained in the far corner. 2 chairs. A single warm lamp. A bottle of unopened sparkling wine resting in an ice bucket. Evelyn stopped at the threshold. "You planned this." Julian looked offended. "I manage a hotel. Planning is the closest thing I have to a love language." She slipped off her heels before stepping onto the terrace. The stone beneath her feet was cool from the rain. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Once, twice, then 3 times in a row. She looked down at the screen. Nora, 3 board members, a journalist, her legal counsel, someone from the mayor's office. The city was still trying to pull her back into itself. Evelyn stared at the phone. Then she pressed the side button until the screen went dark. Julian watched her. "Brave," he said. "Temporary. I'll take it." He pulled out her chair. She sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city breathed around them. Somewhere far below, a siren rose and faded. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the terrace railing. The air smelled clean now, washed free of heat and traffic. Julian sat across from her. "Can I officially take you to dinner now?" Evelyn leaned back. "Officially? No board members. No acquisition offers. No emergency presentations. No reporters trying to turn your emotional life into a public utilities issue. What a tempting pitch. I've been practicing." She looked at him across the table. His tie was still perfect. She reached forward and loosened it. Julian watched her fingers. "You know," he said softly, "you keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Touching my tie when you don't want to admit you're touching me." Evelyn lifted one eyebrow. "That sounds like a dangerous observation." "I'm a dangerous observer." She smiled. Then she let the tie fall loose against his collar. Julian's voice lowered. "So, dinner?" Evelyn pretended to consider it. "You're sure it's only dinner?" He leaned forward slightly. "I thought we'd start there. And after?" His eyes held hers. "After, I hope you don't leave too quickly." For a second, the old instinct rose in her. The one that told her to turn the moment into a joke. To protect herself with distance. To make sure nothing could matter enough to hurt. But she was tired of armor. Tired of being admired for how little she needed. Tired of treating tenderness like a hostile takeover. She reached across the table and caught Julian by the tie. He smiled as she pulled him closer. Then she said, her voice barely above the rainwater dripping from the terrace roof, "You better not be late." She kissed him. It was not frantic. It was not desperate. It was not the kiss of 2 people trying to outrun a crisis. It was slower than that. Warmer. The kind of kiss that arrived after restraint had finally run out of reasons to survive. Julian's hand came to her cheek. His thumb brushed the edge of her jaw. Evelyn held on to his tie as if she had every intention of keeping him exactly where he was. When they pulled apart, neither of them moved far. Julian rested his forehead lightly against hers. Still hungry, he murmured. Evelyn let out a breath that became a laugh. I don't know. That's inconvenient. I had the chef prepare 3 possibilities. She opened her eyes. 3? I wasn't sure whether winning control of your company made you want pasta, steak, or revenge. Is revenge on the menu? Only as a sauce. She laughed again. The sound floated out into the wet New York night. Julian stood and came around the table to pull out her chair. Before she sat, Evelyn looked at the city one last time. The windows of the neighboring buildings glowed in scattered patterns. Some bright, some dark, some warm enough to suggest people waiting for each other inside. She set her phone face down on the table. Then she took Julian's hand. Slowly, she said. Julian looked at her. Slowly, he agreed. And beneath the quiet lamp on the rain-cooled terrace, with the city still shining around them, and no one asking anything from her for once, Evelyn Mercer sat down to the first real dinner she had allowed herself in years.